Okay, let's talk about AI. It's everywhere. It feels like this incredible revolutionary force that's going to change our world in just amazing ways. But, you know, behind that promise, there's a really crucial challenge we have to face. These AI systems can actually learn our worst biases. So the big question is, how do we build an AI that's genuinely fair for everyone? Let's dive in and find out. On one hand, the potential of AI is just immense. We're talking about innovation and efficiency across pretty much every industry you can think of. But on the other hand, if we're not super careful about how we design it, there's a serious risk, a risk of making our existing societal biases even worse. It's that classic story, right? A story of incredible promise and serious peril. I mean, think about medicine. AI is already helping doctors diagnose diseases way faster. It's helping develop new treatments. It's promising a healthier future for all of us. Then you look at the world of finance. AI is the engine behind everything from spotting fraud to deciding on loan applications. It's completely reshaping how we manage our money. And believe it or not, it's even making its way into our courts, influencing decisions that have a profound, life-altering impact on people. These technologies are touching nearly every single part of our society. And that brings us to the most important question of all. With all this power, all this influence, are these systems actually fair? Or are we just building incredibly powerful new tools that, automate our old prejudices? To really get what happens when AI gets it wrong, we need to look at a real-world example. So let's talk about an algorithm called Compass and how it's been used in the U.S. criminal justice system. Okay, so imagine a piece of software that helps a judge decide who gets parole. How? By predicting how likely someone is to commit another crime. That is exactly what Compass was designed to do. A super high-stakes job for any algorithm. So, at its core, Compass spits out a single risk score. And this one number is supposed to predict a person's future behavior. But as we're about to see, that prediction can be dangerously flawed. When researchers actually dug into the data, they found something deeply troubling. Look at this. The algorithm was twice as likely to falsely flag Black defendants as high risk. And at the exact same time, it was more likely to get it wrong in the other direction for white defendants, misclassifying them as low risk when they would actually go on to reoffend. This is a perfect and, honestly, devastating example of how a tool that's meant to be objective can produce deeply unfair results. So, how does this even happen, right? How does bias just creep into a system that's supposed to be just crunching numbers? Well, to understand that, we need to look at the very roots of the problem. See, at its core, AI bias isn't about random mistakes. It's a systematic problem. It happens when an algorithm produces prejudiced results because of faulty assumptions that were baked right into the machine learning process from the start. Experts have pretty much identified 5 key ways this happens. It all starts with data bias, where historical prejudice is just sitting there in the data. Then you have sampling bias, meaning the data isn't even a good representation of reality. Humans can introduce labeling bias when they categorize all that data. The model's own design can create algorithmic bias. And finally, interaction bias kicks in, creating this feedback loop where how users behave actually reinforces stereotypes. It's like a chain reaction of potential unfairness. Let's just zero in on one of the most common sources here, historical data bias. This is what happens when an AI learns from our past. And while, unfortunately, our past is filled with prejudices, the AI doesn't know it's learning a biased pattern. To the machine, it just sees a pattern, period. A perfect real-world example of this is when Amazon tried to build a recruiting tool. They trained it on 10 years of the company's own hiring data. But since the tech industry has historically been male-dominated, the AI basically taught itself that male candidates were better. It started penalizing resumes that had the word women's in them. Amazon, of course, had to scrap the entire project. Okay, so recognizing the problem is step 1. The next, much harder step is figuring out how to fix it. And this is where ethics comes in. We need a moral compass to guide how we build these incredibly powerful technologies. To build AI we can actually trust, we need to embed a set of core principles right into the design process. This means a real commitment to fairness and to transparency, so we can actually understand why an AI is making a certain decision. It means there has to be clear accountability when things go wrong, strong data privacy, and this is critical, always keeping a human in the loop for the most important decisions. And this quote right here highlights a really important distinction. You could, in theory, have a fair but unethical AI. Like, imagine an unbiased autonomous weapon. But you absolutely cannot have an ethical AI that is biased. Fairness isn't just some technical goal. It is the bedrock, the absolute foundation of ethical AI. So, what do we actually do? How do we put all these principles into practice? Well, the path forward is going to require both our technical skills and our human wisdom. The solution is really a two-pronged attack. On the technical side, yeah, we can design algorithms that are built with fairness in mind from the get-go. We can use tools to audit for bias and carefully create balanced data sets. But on the human side, we need ethics boards for oversight, we need diverse teams building the tech, and we need transparent documentation so everyone knows how these systems actually work. And this point is absolutely crucial. We cannot just code our way out of this problem. Bias is a deeply human problem, right? It's rooted in our history, in our societies. Technology can be a powerful tool, for sure, but it can never, ever be the whole solution. Which brings us to what might be the most critical takeaway from all of this. Building fair and ethical AI isn't just a job for the programmers and data scientists out in Silicon Valley. It's a responsibility for all of us. It's going to require collaboration between governments, companies, researchers, and communities to make sure these systems are actually aligned with our shared human values. So as these technologies get woven deeper and deeper into our lives, the final question isn't really about what AI can do. It's about what we will choose to do with it. So the real question is, how are we, all of us, going to work together to ensure the AI we build reflects not our past biases, but the very best of who we hope to be?
Welcome back to the deep dive. So you've probably noticed artificial intelligence, machine learning, they seem to be everywhere now, influencing really critical moments. We're talking job interviews, credit scores, even healthcare decisions. The promise is huge, right? Innovation, efficiency. But when these systems start making decisions that affect our lives so directly, we really need to look under the hood. We need to understand what's going on. So today we're diving into two really big challenges for AI. Bias, that sort of hidden systematic unfairness, and ethics, which is, the moral compass these systems desperately need.
Yeah, and it's really critical we tackle this. I mean, these are systems making calls that until recently only humans made.
Hmm.
And if that bias gets baked in, it doesn't just replicate existing unfairness, it can actually amplify it, and fast. So our goal here is to figure out, are these tools actually helping everyone fairly, or are they just making existing inequalities worse?
Okay, let's unpack that term bias, because in AI, it's not just random mistakes, is it? It's more like a consistent prejudice.
Exactly. It stems from assumptions made all through the machine learning process. Think of it like pollution in the data or the design. And we need to know where it comes from.
Right, so where does this pollution start? What are the sources?
Well, we can usually trace it to about 5 key areas. The first, and maybe the most obvious one, is data bias. This is where the historical data you train the model on already contains societal prejudices. The AI just learns what it sees.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Classic case. A job recommendation engine. If you train it on hiring data from the last, say, 20 years in tech.
Which was heavily male-dominated.
Precisely. The AI learns that the successful profile looks male. So it might automatically downgrade equally qualified female candidates just because the history it learned was biased.
So the past unfairness gets encoded into future predictions.
Wow. Okay, but what if the data isn't obviously prejudiced, but maybe it's just incomplete? That's the second source, sampling bias. This happens when your training data just doesn't represent everyone it's supposed to serve. Imagine a medical AI trained to detect skin cancer, but it's only trained on images of lighter skin tones.
It would likely perform poorly on darker skin tones.
Exactly. It's not intentional malice. The system is effectively blind to groups it wasn't taught about because the sample was skewed.
Okay, so we have bad history in the data and incomplete representation. What else?
Next up is labeling bias. Even if you have diverse data, humans often have to label it, categorize things. Think about labeling data for, say, predicting recidivism. Someone has to decide how to label past behaviors, maybe aggressive or non-aggressive.
And those labels could reflect the labeler's own stereotypes.
That's the risk. Their subjective judgments become the ground truth for the AI. the model learns those potentially biased labels as fact.
That's a tricky one. So bias can come from the data itself, the sample, and the human labeling. What about the algorithm, the model itself?
Yes, that leads us to algorithmic bias. This is more about the design choices engineers make. Sometimes, optimizing for one metric, like overall accuracy, can cause problems. For instance, if a minority group is only, say, 2% of the data, a model might achieve 98% overall accuracy by basically ignoring that group entirely. High accuracy overall, but terrible biased performance for that minority.
So the very design can inadvertently disadvantage smaller groups. Okay, and you mentioned 5 sources. What's the last one?
The last one involves us, the users. Interaction bias. This is the feedback loop. Think about recommendation systems or search engines. If early user clicks tend towards certain, maybe harmful or stereotypical content,
The algorithm learns that's what people want to see.
exactly, starts recommending it more, amplifying the bias. Our own interactions can inadvertently train the system to spread problematic content. It creates this echo chamber.
Right. So data bias, sampling bias, labeling bias, algorithmic bias, interaction bias. When you lay them all out, the potential for harm seems huge. We're talking people being denied loans, jobs, getting misdiagnosed, plus the damage to public trust.
Absolutely. And that's why the ethics conversation is so crucial. Because these AI systems wield significant power now.
So what are the ethical guardrails we need? The core principles?
Well, since AI is making decisions with real-world consequences, we need frameworks to ensure they align with human values and don't violate fundamental rights. It's about responsible deployment.
And the first principle clearly has to be fairness, right? Directly tackling that bias issue we just discussed.
Fairness is absolutely central. Systems need to treat individuals and groups equitably. But here's a really important nuance. Defining fairness is surprisingly tricky. There are actually multiple mathematical definitions. Do you want the same error rate across all groups? Or maybe the same positive prediction rate?
And those might conflict.
They often do. Achieving one type of fairness can sometimes mean sacrificing another. It forces difficult trade-offs that need to be made explicit.
That's complex, and often hidden inside the code, I guess, which leads perfectly to the next principle, transparency and explainability. We need to know why the AI made a decision.
Absolutely critical. The black box problem, especially with complex models like deep learning, is a major hurdle. If developers can't explain how a decision was made,
You can't spot the bias, let alone fix it.
exactly, and you certainly can't have accountability, which is the next principle. If harm occurs, someone needs to be responsible to the developers, the organization deploying it. Without transparency, accountability is almost impossible.
Okay, so fairness, transparency, accountability, what else is essential?
We also need strong privacy and data protection. Handling sensitive personal data securely is non-negotiable. Think about frameworks like GDPR giving people rights over their data.
Including sometimes the right to an explanation.
Yes. Then there's human oversight. For critical systems, military, critical infrastructure, high-stakes medical decisions, humans must remain in the loop, able to intervene or override.
We can't just let the machines run wild in those areas.
Definitely not. And closely related is safety and security. The AI needs to be robust, resistant to errors, hacks, or malicious use.
And wrapping it all up, the sort of overarching goal.
Fundamentally, it boils down to two classic ethical ideas: beneficence and non-maleficence.
Yeah.
Or, put simply, do good and avoid doing harm. The technology should ultimately serve human well-being.
It seems like bias is probably the most immediate ethical challenge, then.
I'd say so. A biased model inherently violates fairness, often transparency too, making it unethical by definition. You can't really build ethical AI without actively tackling bias. Though it's worth noting, you could have an unbiased model that's still unethical. Think autonomous weapons, perhaps.
Right. So ethics demands we address bias head-on. Let's look at where this has gone wrong in the real world. The COMPASS algorithm in the U.S. justice system is often cited.
Yes. COMPASS is a stark example. It's a risk assessment tool used for decisions about things like parole. But studies found it was significantly more likely to flag black defendants as high risk of reoffending compared to white defendants, even when their actual offense histories were similar or less severe.
So it wasn't predicting future crime accurately.
It seemed to be predicting arrest rates, which are heavily influenced by historical policing patterns and systemic biases. So the algorithm, trained on that data, essentially learned and perpetuated existing racial disparities, a clear violation of fairness.
It baked in the system's existing bias. And wasn't there a similar issue with an Amazon recruitment tool?
That's right. Amazon tried to automate resume screening. They trained an AI on resumes submitted over the previous 10 years.
And the tech industry hiring pool over that
It
time?
was overwhelmingly male.
Well,
So the AI taught itself that male candidates were preferable. It reportedly penalized resumes containing terms like women's chess club captain, and even downgraded graduates from women's colleges.
so basically learn to filter out women.
Essentially, yes. They eventually scrapped the project, but it's a perfect example of historical data bias leading to a discriminatory outcome. A major ethical lapse in fairness and accountability, all stemming from trusting flawed data.
These examples really drive home how AI isn't just neutral processing. It can absorb and even amplify societal problems if we're not careful.
Exactly. It turbocharges historical prejudice if efficiency is the only goal.
Okay, so for people actually building and deploying these systems, developers, companies, this sounds challenging. How do we build trustworthy AI without completely stalling progress? What are the practical steps?
It's a balance, for sure. We need both technical solutions and better governance. On the technical side, we need to move beyond just optimizing for accuracy. We need things like fairness-aware algorithms. These are models specifically designed with fairness constraints built in. So the goal isn't just be accurate, it's be accurate and ensure error rates are similar across different groups, for example.
That sounds like it needs ongoing monitoring.
Definitely. That's where bias detection tools and regular audits become crucial. We need processes to continuously check for bias creeping in, and it starts right at the beginning with balanced data sets. We need to be much more deliberate about collecting diverse, representative data before we even start training.
And what about understanding how the model works, that black box issue?
That's where explainable AI, or XAI, comes in. It's a whole field focused on developing techniques to make model decisions interpretable, to show why a certain input led to a certain output. This is vital for debugging bias and building trust.
So those are some technical approaches. What about the organizational side? Policies, governance?
That's equally important. Companies need internal structures. We're seeing more AI ethics boards popping up, diverse groups within organizations tasked with oversight. Another really practical step is standardizing documentation, things like model cards or data sheets for data sets.
Like nutrition labels for AI.
Exactly. They document things like, what data was it trained on? What are its limitations? How does it perform for different subgroups? Who is it intended for? It boosts transparency and accountability.
That seems like a concrete way to address some of the earlier principles.
It is. And then broadly, we need alignment on standards. Adopting guidelines like the EU's Trustworthy AI framework helps create a common baseline. But maybe most importantly, this needs interdisciplinary collaboration. It can't just be engineers. You need ethicists, social scientists, domain experts, even the end users involved in the design and testing process.
Get more perspectives in the room from the start.
Precisely, to catch potential issues early.
Okay, this has been quite a journey. We've unpacked the 5 main ways bias gets into AI systems, laid out the core ethical principles like fairness, transparency, and accountability, and seen how failures play out with examples like Compass and Amazon.
And the key takeaway really is that bias and ethics are completely intertwined. You can't achieve ethical AI without actively identifying and mitigating bias. It requires both technical rigor and strong organizational governance.
It's not just a technical problem, it's a societal one.
Absolutely. It's a shared responsibility. So maybe a final thought for everyone listening to consider. We know that the data we use to train AI reflects our current world, flaws and all, biases included. The big question then becomes, how do we design AI systems that don't just mirror today's imperfect society, but actually help us build the more equitable future we aspire to?
Wow.
That requires more than just clever coding. It requires, I think, a kind of moral imagination, something to really think about as these technologies become even more integrated into our lives.